Mark was on his way to a psychologist for another appointment. He was tired of people saying he was deluded, not believing him. He saw weird things more and more lately, but what frustrated him so much was no one believing him. He knew what he saw was real. He reached the building and went inside and took the elevator to the 3rd floor where his psychologist had his office. While he was in the elevator, he was thinking of what to tell his psychologist this week. In the office, Mark's psychologist spoke. "Oh Mark, don't worry. We are going to get to the bottom of this. We just need to find out a few things about what happened in your past that might be causing these breaks in reality. I am going to show you a few drawings, and I would kindly appreciate if you told me what you saw in them, please." Mark's psychologist held up the first photo, and Mark looked at it for a few seconds, then said, "I see a dragon." Then he held up another. "And what do you see in this one, please, Mark?" Mark yet again took another few seconds to look at it, and then said, "Some kind of alien." Mark was getting impatient with this exercise. He saw many times in the movies, and he often wondered what it was in aid of. It was like it was just trying to find out, was the person crazy? And he knew he wasn't crazy. He knew he saw what he saw. The only thing is, why doesn't anyone believe him? He felt like if someone just believed him, maybe they would go away. His psychologist held up another photo. Mark took longer this time, and then said, "It's obviously a gun." His psychologist smiled and said, "Okay Mark, this is going to take a while to sort out, but I can guarantee you that what you see is not real, and that's for sure." 30 minutes later, the session had ended, and Mark had left the building. His psychologist felt strange. He felt kind of faint. Then he froze in fear when he saw a dragon fly into the room. Then what looked like an alien came into the room. He screamed out in horror, but before his receptionist could come into the room to see what was wrong, a gun floated in the air over to his head, and then the gun went off. When the receptionist came into the room, she screamed and called the police, telling them he had shot himself in the head. Mark wondered why his psychologist killed himself, but he was relieved. His visions had stopped. Me and my friend Mike were hanging out during our Christmas holidays. We were playing computer games. We were enjoying being inside in the cozy house as it was cold outside, but we soon got tired of being cooped up inside, so went out for a walk up the road from my house. We passed an old house that people said was haunted. My friend asked me, "Is that really haunted? It looks so cool." I said, "I'm not sure is it haunted, but people say it is." My friend said we should go into that house. It would be so cool. I said, "No way, I don't want to go in there. It's really old. Even if it's not haunted, it could fall down on top of us." My friend laughed and said, "Come on, if we don't go into this house, we will be laughing about this in about 20 years' time, laughing that you were scared to go in." My friend laughed again. I didn't give in, so we just went back home playing more computer games. I didn't see my friend anymore after that, as he had moved to the next town, and there was no social media back then that people could stay in touch with. 20 years later, I was watching a Christmas movie on TV, and there was a knock on the door. I got up to answer it. Before I answered, I could see a young boy with what looked like a bag walking out on the road. I looked down at my footstep and noticed a paper. I picked it up and read it. The heading read, "Young boy's remains found during the demolition of an old house." It continued to explain what I knew was my friend. I wondered how he could have ended up in the house, as we didn't go in that day. I went back inside and sat down on my chair. On Christmas morning, I was opening my gifts and came across one that had no name on it. When I opened it, there was a note inside, which read, "If you had just gone in that day, 20 years ago with me, we would be laughing about it a different way. Today, like I said. But now I'm dead, as I went in myself a week later and was killed by a guy dressed as Santa Claus." Suddenly I jumped as my doorbell rang. I wondered who it was, still in shock by getting a letter from my friend who was killed by a guy dressed as Santa Claus 20 years ago. I didn't even realize he was killed until now. I just thought I didn't see him since he moved town. The doorbell rang again. I snapped out of my daze and went to answer it. There was a guy dressed as Santa Claus, holding a knife, and he said, "Happy Christmas." He stabbed the knife into me as I was lying down on the ground. I knew I was dying. The Santa Claus smiled down at me and said, "That story in the paper was a bit fabricated. They picked up on a little white lie. You see, it was me who killed that guy, dressed up as Santa Claus." Yes, you guessed it right. If you guessed I am your friend. Yes, I was your friend, until they put me away 20 years ago, and they put me away for 20 years. They said they'd only put me away until I was 18, but this annoying guy got a bad beating in the place they kept me. It's amazing and funny how they picked up on a little white lie 20 years later. But wait, you might ask what are the remains of the person killed there? If it wasn't me, then who is it? Oh, I better fast forward telling this story before you bleed to death before you hear the end. The remains, you see, were of me. The bastard cut my fingers off and knocked a few of my teeth out in the struggle when I killed him. Wasn't it coincidence they only discovered it 20 years later, exactly from the date we went into that house? Yes, I keep a diary, that's how I know. I gave an anonymous tip because I knew that my mom had told everyone I went missing. They didn't want anyone knowing their precious little son was locked up in an asylum. They just threw me in there and forgot about me. They said I was missing, and that's why the paper assumed it was me that was killed in that house. After all, the media didn't know there was no man killed there that day. They were so good in covering up my disappearance. I would have never been locked up if that Santa Claus didn't attack me 20 years ago. It was self-defense, but they didn't see it that way. He went crazy shouting it was his home. He kept saying he wasn't going to get out of there. I didn't care if he wanted to live there or wanted to run out and never see the place again. But he took out a knife and attacked me. But luckily I learned martial arts and I protected myself. But they treated me like the criminal, not the victim. But now you will be a victim. You are a victim. And soon you will be a dead victim. It was a hot summer's day, and 3 school friends met after 10 years. They were both told during a phone call they had to meet someone for something urgent. They didn't worry if it was some maniac because it was in the middle of the city, outside the mall, so they couldn't really do anything without there being loads of witnesses. When the 3 men realised they all got the same phone call, they thought it to be a bit weird, wondering who would want to say something urgent to 3 school friends. It was 2 p.m. and they were meant to be meeting the person at 2, so they expected them any minute. The 3 friends didn't bother try to catch up on old times. They were more interested in who it was wanted to see them and why. Another 5 minutes passed and no one was turning up. Then suddenly a car rushed up onto the footpath where they were standing and knocked them over, killing them. If they weren't dead instantly, they would be gone before they'd reach the hospital with the speed and impact the car hit the 3 men with. Passers-by started screaming at the carnage on the road as the car sped by and went up the street, out of sight. Jason, Mike and Sam were bullying Paul in school. This was going on for weeks. Jason said to Paul in a mocking way, "You can't even walk to school, you baby. You have to get your mommy to walk you to school because you're too afraid to walk yourself, you big baby." Paul was 8 and his mom used to walk him to school every day. Paul used to like it, but told his mom eventually that the boys were bullying him. Paul's mom wanted to confront the boys, but Paul pleaded with her not to, as it would only make things a lot worse, he told her. He told his mom he wanted to walk to school on his own. He was 8 and he should be allowed. All this time Paul loved his mom walking him to school, but only pleaded to be able to walk alone to stop the bullying. Paul's mom gave in and allowed him to walk to school. Paul was walking to school, hoping Jason, Mike and Sam would see him and know that he can of course walk to school on his own. He crossed the road to school but didn't see a car, and the car hit Paul and killed him instantly. Paul's mom was inconsolable for weeks, and at the funeral she could see the boys standing across, knowing what Paul was worried about, and that was the reason he wanted to walk to school alone. She told herself, "I'll get my revenge on ye someday. You can guarantee I'll get my revenge." Jason was just home from work and turned on the baby monitor, smiling, looking at his wife and baby upstairs. He could still see how beautiful his wife looked and still fell as in love with her today as much, if not more, as the day they met. It was love at first sight for him, so he tells her anyway. But whether it was love at first sight, it definitely is love now. He was about to walk upstairs to his wife and the baby when there was a knock on the door. He answered it and couldn't believe his eyes when his wife was standing at the door right in front of him. He felt a shiver run up his spine, wondering if his wife is standing at the door, then who is upstairs with his baby? Mary, Jason's wife, asked him what was wrong. He said, "I don't know what's happening or how, but I was just watching you on the baby monitor and then you knocked on the door." Then suddenly Mary put on a face like she was just after seeing a ghost. I turned around and saw at the top of the stairs a woman that looked exactly like Mary. I felt a shiver run up my spine again. Suddenly, my wife ran up the stairs, shouting, "Get away from my baby, you maniac! Get away!" There was a fight between my wife and the woman, and suddenly my wife pushed the woman downstairs. She was dead on the impact of her head against the wall. My wife explained, "Jason, you know I love you, and you know that you mean everything to me, but that woman is my twin sister. I am so sorry to have to tell you this way, and I am so sorry I lied to you about my parents dying in a car crash. I feared you'd be turned off me if I said the truth. That's my twin sister. I know I told you. I never had any sisters, but I just didn't want any complications. My parents could never tell us apart. It made me sick we looked so alike, but we were so different. Even my parents could never tell us apart, except for a knife wound on her back that she got in a fight in high school. When she was a teenager, she got put into an asylum at 17 for murdering my parents, but last week she escaped. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you this sooner. I really should have." We decided to go to the police, and thankfully my wife didn't get arrested after the police knew her twin sister's history. That night, we were in bed, and I felt a strange feeling. I don't know why. Then, out of the light of the moon, I felt a shiver go up my spine as I saw on my wife's back a scar that I never saw before, because there was no scar before. I then realized my wife was not lying next to me, but her twin sister was, who killed her parents and who killed my beloved wife. I froze in fear, wondering what to do next. Then I saw a knife rise, and I heard words mumble in a sleepy tone. "Are you awake?" My name is Tim, but I have a secret identity that only the top secret agencies in the world knows. Well, a few of them anyway. People talk about Illuminati and the New World Order, but the truth is, what my latest mission is going to unravel is something a lot more sinister. There is a facility in the outbacks of Arizona, and I am given the job to break their security system, get inside their lair, and uncover what exactly it is they are hiding. I have no idea what I'm going to find in here, but I use my coding skills, stealth skills, and so much more to get inside the building. There are high-tech alarms and lasers I have to pass. I watch out for CCTV cameras to not get caught in any of their line of view. I am told the center of operations is in the main building, so I finally enter. I jump as I see myself on a giant screen. I was dodging cameras and alarms, and now that I'm in the most important part of the building, I see people watching me on a giant screen. One of them turns and has a sinister smile on their face. I freeze knowing that there is no way out for me. He begins to speak. "Well, there now, don't be afraid. You're the biggest, best secret agent out there, aren't you? What name do you go by? Agent Beyond? You were given that name at your training facility where you trained to become a secret agent, and you did above and beyond what you were asked, so that's how you got the name Agent Beyond. I was wondering how he knew so much about me, knowing all that information was classified top secret. I was wondering how could it be an inside job." He then began to speak again. "You have just stumbled onto the biggest scientific breakthrough in human history. Well, your history, that is. You see, I am Jasper. I am from a post-human civilization with vast computing power, and I know you were sent here to seek information on what it is we do. Let me explain to you, but I must warn you that you will not be able to tell your friends in your secret agency, or anyone else for that matter. You see, humanity isn't ready for what I'm about to show you, and what I'm about to tell you. I know you wouldn't be here only for a handful of tech billionaires smelling the scent of what actually was happening. But let me tell you, as I said, me and everyone in this room besides you are from an advanced post-human civilization with vast computing power, and we run simulations of our ancestors in the universe. Earth is just a tiny piece of the game, but saying it in plain English, reality, as you know it, is a simulation, and we knew it would come to a stage where someone would find out. So I'm sorry, Agent Beyond, but you will be erased from the simulation now. Tony's grandfather was sick for months, and he was going more and more downhill. His grandfather was an alcoholic and still used to sip on his whiskey, even in his deathbed. Tony told his grandfather to give up the drink, but his grandfather said it made him happy and cope with his illness. Tony's grandfather took a turn for the worst one day, and the doctor was called. When the doctor was out of the room, Tony's grandfather said, "I am so sorry. I've committed a horrible crime years and years ago. I wish I never did." Tony wondered whether to ask his grandfather what it was, and decided to give him the option of whether he wanted to tell him or not. "Grandad, you know I love you, so you can tell me what it was if you like." Tony's grandfather said, "I stole from your grandmom. I stole her life savings. I had a huge drink problem, well, I still do, but I regretted stealing from your grandmom." Tony hated the idea of his granddad stealing from his grandmom, but he wasn't going to let anything turn him against his granddad on his deathbed. Suddenly Tony's granddad said, "That's not all. I made a spell to something happen in exchange for my freedom. When I pass away, you will have to run for your life." I asked my granddad what did he mean. He said, "There will be a dark spirit." A few minutes later, Tony's granddad passed away peacefully. Suddenly, Tony heard a noise and turned around to see a dark figure that must have been the dark spirit his granddad warned him about. Sarah was really excited to finally get a chance to work at her dream job, which was a model. She got a letter through the mail offering her a photo shoot at a really exclusive model agency. It was really big in the modeling world because no one actually knew who the photographer was or who the models were, but they were featured in big magazines and big art exhibitions. Sarah used to like the gothic style of the models. They were like mannequins, she used to think. Sarah received an email telling her what time the photo shoot was and the directions. She got a taxi to the photo shoot and she was so excited. She said to the taxi driver, "I'm really excited because I'm going to do a photo shoot for this really cool modeling photographer. His work is featured in huge magazines and very important art exhibitions." The taxi driver smiled. When Sarah got there, she was surprised when a man wearing a masquerade mask answered the door. She wondered was he the photographer and asked him, "Hello sir, are you the photographer?" He replied, "Yes dear, I am the photographer, and you will become a very good model. Just sit in the room there, and I will be with you in a few minutes. I'll make you a cup of tea. I just have to get a few last minute details done. Then I will take a very artistic photo shoot of you." The man gave Sarah the cup of tea and asked her to wait a few minutes while he got things ready for the photo shoot. When Sarah was in the room, she saw a few photos of a girl sitting down with flowers around her, and she thought it looked so beautiful. As she was waiting for the photographer, she was looking around the room. There was a curtain and she wondered what was behind it. Her curiosity got the better of her, so she went behind it. She jumped when she saw the girl in the photo was sitting still on the chair. She guessed it must have been a mannequin, but as she held her hand, she knew by how cold it was and the feel of it that it was a corpse. She jumped when the photographer was behind her. He spoke. Now, dear, why were you so intrusive to look behind that curtain? You have stumbled across my secret recipe to success. This is the true way of capturing true beauty. I kill my models just a few minutes before I photograph them, and they don't have violent killings. I just poison them with a cup of tea so I can easily move their facial expression to how I want it. You see, dear, they say a photograph captures a moment, but I capture a moment entirely, that moment of that person's last moment. Yes, I might take away their cup of tea and move them around a little, but still that pose for that photograph is their last moment. Sarah screamed. The photographer said, Now, dear, don't be like that. You were a very good girl to finish your cup of tea, I see." Sarah felt faint, and the man posed her in the chair for her photo shoot.